Of the 13 Star Trek films, 11 of them feature a primary villain. Not an antagonist, but a villain. You got Khan, Krug, Sybok, Chang, Sauron, Borg Queen, Barafo, Shenzan, Nero, British Khan, and most recently Krall. Why? Well, while the executives at Paramount might come off as stupid, they do have ears, and they know how to use them. Trekkies have been saying, for decades, that The Wrath of Khan is one of the best Trek films ever made. So it's no wonder Paramount tries to make copycats in an effort to please fans and make a boatload of money. I mean, why break the formula if you know it's working? Except it's really not working. In fact, even though Nemesis was a direct copycat of The Wrath of Khan, it tanked so hard they had to shelve the entire film franchise for nearly 7 years. In my previous video, I described my reasons behind why The Wrath of Khan was elevated into being a cinematic masterpiece. Its major themes, tight script, and compelling characters created an overall spectacular film. However, for some reason, Paramount zeroed in on having a good villain as the sole purpose for Khan's success. And with the exception of The Voyage Home, Paramount has yet to release a Trek film that didn't attempt to feature a villain who was, quote, better than Khan. Now, this isn't to say that having a villain in your film automatically makes it bad. I'm saying that Paramount clinging onto this idea of outdoing The Wrath of Khan has limited the creativity of Star Trek films as a whole. So the question today is simple. Did Khan torpedo the future films? This is Ketwalski. While several Star Trek films have been able to use their villains to great success, most of them suffer to what I'm going to refer to as the Khan effect. My goal here is to detail how these films were not only held back by having a Khan-type villain, but to also show how they could have been improved with either a total removal or complete rework of these characters. So let's begin with Star Trek III. Klingon Commander Krug, played by Christopher Lloyd, was masterfully acted but ultimately wasted. His primary function in the film is to be used as a plot device for action, killing Kirk's son, and the catalyst for destroying the Enterprise, all of which falls flat in comparison to Khan, which is not something you want when talking about Star Trek II's direct sequel. Additionally, the majority of his role was rewritten due to studio feedback wanting more action in the film. The film would have been served better with a covert attempt to get information on the Genesis device. This would have created a new layer into the Star Trek universe. A political spy thriller with intergalactic espionage would have served as a more serious backdrop to Kirk and crew attempting to rescue Spock. Instead of having the Enterprise being stolen, we could have seen Kirk work out a deal with the Romulans and the Klingons to get passage to the Genesis planet in exchange for information, only to have Kirk double-cross him at the end of the film, which would be a setup for Kirk's reputation and relationship with the Klingons that would have been paid off in Star Trek VI. In Star Trek V, Sybok was both praised and panned for being too close in relation to Khan. The film's attempt to paint the character as another ultimate matchup against Kirk fell flat due to poor scripting and direction. Instead of having Sybok be this mastermind character who outsmarts the Enterprise crew and wants to visit God at the center of the universe, the film should have kept the focus on the hostage situation in Paradise City. There, we could have explored a story about Spock's long-lost brother, their life together on Vulcan, how they grew apart, and what ultimately led to Sybok's radicalization into becoming a terrorist and taking hostages. Themes about loyalty, family, causes, and standing for what you believe in could have been better explored if Sybok was just a regular character who had lost his way. With a proper script, the character of Sybok could have come off as sympathetic to the audience, almost relatable in some way for possibly being marginalized during his youth on Vulcan. That tragedy would have made for a much more memorable character, not a bizarre TV evangelicalist. Now let's move on to Star Trek Generations. Ultimately, the film didn't need the inclusion of Dr. Sauron. In fact, it didn't need the Duras sisters either. The energy ribbon going through space without a care of whatever damage it may cause would have made for a far better science fiction story. It could have even paralleled the crystalline entity in many respects. A simple script change could have the ribbon on a collision course for a heavily populated planet or possibly even Earth. From there, Picard and company would have to grapple with the consequences of not intervening and stopping the ribbon altogether. Perhaps the populated planet is pre-warp. Then you could have a great story about how the Prime Directive prevents an evacuation of the planet. Or, if it is threatening Earth, Picard and the crew would have to weigh the costs of potentially killing millions of people still living within the Nexus itself. Themes about choosing a lesser evil and morality, intervention, and death could have all been explored without a villain. For Star Trek Insurrection, I would remove the entire Sona race altogether, along with the primary villain Rafo, both of which are forgettable and are not important to Star Trek's overall lore. Instead, I would have the Federation Council be the antagonist of the story. Since the devastating wars with the Dominion, the Federation could be looking to take the life-healing powers of the Baku's planet with or without permission. While the Federation Council knows that it's wrong, there are just too many people who could benefit from this medical breakthrough. The needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few, or the one. Does that sound familiar? How amazing would it have been to twist that phrase from The Wrath of Khan into a new film? I bet Paramount would have loved it. After making his appeal to the Federation Council, we could have Picard and the Enterprise actually going against the Federation and trying to stop them from destroying the planet. Again, because an attempt is made to create an all-powerful and masterful villain, it detracts from a possibly better storyline. Major themes about loyalty and family and for standing up what is right no matter what the cost would have been so much more powerful than this.
Bro, I thought we're getting too old.
Nemesis was Paramount's first attempt at a full-blown Khan remake, but they missed the entire mark about a smart script, instead focusing on action and explosions. While the film's main villain, Shinzon, had some serious potential, the character was drowned out entirely by the bizarre plot about a Romulan coup and doomsday weapons. The film should have been about Picard, similar to Kirk in The Wrath of Khan, dealing with getting much older and perhaps missing out on opportunities not taken. This would have been a great time to see him at the Picard vineyard, tending to the grapevines. We could see him living alone, remembering his recently deceased extended family, and worried about the future of his family line. Perhaps he was even removed from service after the Baku incident, and regrets that to some degree as well. We could have it so that Riker and Deanna are on board the Titan, and they are the ones who find Shinzon. Starfleet would recall Picard to visit his clone, and perhaps even try to integrate him into Earth society, only to have it later revealed that he's lost and was maybe brainwashed by the Romulans to steal something on Earth. Themes about family and belonging, regret, getting older, and being at peace could have all been explored here without a single punch being thrown. Instead, we got mind rape and a knife fight by a character who was supposed to be better than Khan, once again. Now, if you thought I wasn't going to bring up the JJ films, then you must be new to this channel. In which case, hello! In Star Trek 2009, we were greeted with another seemingly unstoppable and mastermind villain, this time in the form of a Romulan miner named Nero. Throughout the entire film, he is constantly one step ahead of the heroes, destroys Vulcan, outsmarts two different Spocks, and almost blows up Earth. He's definitely set up as a character who is supposed to outpace Khan. And yet, most non-Trekkies cannot even remember his name. Why? Because ultimately his character was useless. I would remove the entire Romulan plotline from the film, save for the destruction of Romulus itself. I would have it so that older Spock saves the planet, but is sucked into the wormhole like in the movie. However, when reappearing, he accidentally brings some of the supernova in with him, unintentionally killing Kirk's dad. The rest of the film's events would proceed as normal, with Kirk eventually getting command of the Enterprise. It would get revealed somehow that young Spock knows of how Kirk's father really died, and that initiates some kind of manhunt/trial for old Spock. This would eventually lead to a seriously powerful moment for character growth, as Kirk perhaps forgives old Spock for accidentally killing his dad. Kirk would then understand that the needs of so many Romulans outweighed his need for a father. While that's a tough decision, it's an important one. Okay, so if you haven't been agreeing with my hypothesis on the Khan effect, or that it's all Paramount's fault and that they fundamentally don't understand why Wrath of Khan is a cinematic masterpiece, then you should look no further than our next film. Star Trek Into Darkness. Where do I even begin? This film was a terrible idea from the get-go, and most fans would agree. This is Paramount's second and so far final attempt at remaking The Wrath of Khan, but they didn't even bother to disguise it itself as anything new. Instead, they just recast Khan with a new actor, we'll call him British Khan, and attempted to recapture the emotional weight and intelligence of the original 1980 film. And they missed the mark in every conceivable way. Because I don't want to turn this into an entire video about how much I hate this film, I will simply say that the only villain needed for this script was Admiral Marcus, played by the amazing Peter Weller. His character carried significant Trek lore weight, was well written, and had clear motivations that tied into the first J.J. Abrams film, and was much more of a match for Kirk and company. Having the Enterprise crew become somewhat disillusioned with Starfleet based off of Admiral Marcus's character's actions would have made for some really great character development. Finally, we have Star Trek Beyond. Don't know who the villain is here? Well, it's not surprising since a lot of people didn't see this film in theaters, and the character was a bit of a throwaway. Weirdly though, this film, in my opinion, had the potential to actually outpace Khan as the best villain of all time, but they mucked it all up with this weird mutation plotline. The film's villain, Krall, was a Starfleet captain and former Mako. He and his crew got lost in the vastness of space. Eventually, he and his fellow crew found a way to survive, but by doing so it changed them into these crazed alien beasts who became hell-bent on destroying the Federation. Instead of all that alien beast stuff, Krall should have remained human. He could have been picked up in perhaps an isolation pod by Kirk, who was beginning to distrust Starfleet because of Admiral Marcus in the previous film. We could see Krall perhaps influence Kirk into breaking rules and being more gruff and violating more directives, which would cause conflict between himself and the crew members on the Enterprise. Eventually, this could lead to a choice about Kirk staying with Starfleet or moving on without the Enterprise altogether. Imagine that. Major themes here would be loyalty and family, crossroads, disillusionment, and hatred. So, some of you may argue that a lot of these decisions weren't Paramount's fault, and that hackjob writers and directors are what caused the decline of the Trek film franchise. My response to that would be, while yes, these filmmakers are partly to blame, the one common denominator between the films has been Paramount. They want a villain because they want to make a film better than Khan, because they feel as though it's going to re-energize the fan base and hopefully lead to a box office smash. And to their credit, Paramount has gotten close to this mark a few times. But that's a story for another video.